My name is Elena Morales. I was 34 years old, living in a small, rent-stabilized apartment in Brooklyn, when I finally understood that love, when it's conditional, stops being love at all. I'm telling you this now, because I wish someone had asked me this question years ago. What do you do when the people who raised you only value you when you're convenient? Because for most of my life, I believed that if I stayed quiet, stayed useful, stayed grateful, I'd eventually earn my place. I was wrong. I've always been the reasonable one in my family, the one who didn't cause scenes, the one who adjusted. My mother, Patricia, used to say I was low maintenance. She meant it as a compliment. I wore it like a badge of honor for a long time. We grew up in Queens, 3 kids, same roof, same rules, but somehow very different expectations. My older brother, Daniel, was the pride story. College athlete, loud, charismatic. He failed classes, switched majors twice, and still somehow ended up being the one with potential. My younger sister, Marisa, was the fragile one, artistic, sensitive. Everyone tiptoed around, her feelings like they were glass. And then there was me, Elena, the dependable one. I learned early that being helpful earned me peace. I packed lunches, watched Marisa after school, translated paperwork for my parents when English got complicated. I didn't mind, or at least I told myself I didn't. Because every time I did something right, my mother would smile and say, "See, Elena understands." Understanding became my role. By the time I was 16, I knew exactly how to disappear inside a room full of family. At dinner, if Daniel talked over me, I stopped mid-sentence. If Marissa cried, my problems suddenly felt selfish. If my mother looked tired, I swallowed whatever I needed to say. I wasn't ignored. That would have been easier. I was overlooked. There's a difference. I paid my way through college. Not because my parents couldn't help at all, but because they assumed I'd manage. Daniel needed support for his future. Marissa needed space to find herself. I needed to be practical, so I worked, waitressing, office temp jobs, late nights with textbooks and cold coffee. When I graduated, no one threw a party. My mom hugged me and said, "I knew you'd be fine." Fine. That word followed me everywhere. I stayed in New York, built a life quietly. I became a community outreach coordinator for a nonprofit in Brooklyn. The work wasn't glamorous. It involved long hours, limited pay, and a lot of emotional labor. But it mattered to me. I helped families navigate housing resources. I sat with people who had nowhere else to go. I listened. Ironically, the thing my family never did for me was what I did every day for strangers. My mother didn't like my job. She never said it outright at first. Just little comments. "So when are you getting a real position? You work too much for too little money." You know people judge based on careers, Elena. I learned to nod, change the subject, smile, understanding, remember? Every holiday, I showed up with gifts, with patience. I listened to Daniel talk about his latest business idea that never quite launched. I praised Marissa's art shows I wasn't invited to. I helped clean up afterward. My mom always said, "I don't know what I'd do without you." At the time, I thought that meant something. Mother's Day was coming up that year, and I assumed, like always, that we'd do the usual brunch in Manhattan. Same restaurant, same forced smiles, same photos posted online. I didn't expect appreciation. I never did. I just expected inclusion. That Friday evening, after a long week at work, I came home exhausted. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag, and checked my phone. That's when I saw the family group chat lighting up. Photos, reservations, a screenshot of a restaurant confirmation. Then my sister typed, "Can't wait for Sunday." I scrolled back, confused. I wasn't tagged, wasn't mentioned, wasn't asked. I refreshed the chat. Nothing. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then my phone buzzed again. A private message from my mother, just one line. And as I read it, standing alone in my kitchen, something inside me went very, very quiet. The message from my mother read, "Elena, we decided to keep Mother's Day a bit more presentable this year. I know your work schedule and lifestyle don't always fit these things. I'm sure you understand." I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I didn't understand what she meant, but because she had finally said it out loud. Presentable. That was the word that echoed in my head. Not busy, not overworked, not tired, unpresentable. As if the work I did every day, helping people survive, somehow made me embarrassing. As if I made her look bad. I typed and erased several replies. "I can adjust my schedule." "I already took Sunday off." Did I do something wrong? None of them felt right. Because the truth was, this wasn't about a schedule. This was about image. I didn't respond. That silence felt unfamiliar, almost dangerous. My whole life, silence had been something I used to protect others, never myself. The group chat kept going. Daniel sent a thumbs up. Marissa posted a heart emoji. Someone joked about mimosas. No one noticed I wasn't there. That hurt more than my mother's message. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was angry, because I was replaying moments, hundreds of them. Every time I had defended my job, every time I had paid my own way quietly, every time I had been the backup plan. I realized something uncomfortable in the early hours of the morning. They didn't exclude me by accident. They excluded me because they knew I wouldn't fight it. Sunday morning arrived quietly. No brunch outfit, no subway ride into Manhattan, no forced smile. Just me, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I forgot to drink. Around noon, photos started appearing online. My mother in a soft pastel dress, Daniel leaning in, arm around her, Marissa holding flowers. The caption read, "So grateful for my beautiful children." Children, plural. I wasn't tagged. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was more like a door closing. I thought about calling my mother. I imagined her voice, pleasant, defensive. "Oh, Elena, don't be sensitive. You know how these things look. You're always so understanding." Understanding had become a weapon. So instead of calling her, I did something new. I closed the app. The next few weeks were quiet in a way I wasn't used to. I didn't initiate calls. I didn't send check-in texts. I didn't remind anyone of birthdays or appointments. No announcements. No confrontations. I simply stopped reaching. At first, I expected someone to notice. They didn't. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into it, not to distract myself, but because it was the one place where my presence mattered. Clients remembered my name. Coworkers asked for my input. People thanked me without conditions. One afternoon, my supervisor pulled me aside and said, "Elena, have you ever considered applying for the senior coordinator role?" I laughed reflexively. Then she said, "I'm serious. You already do most of the work." That night, I sat alone on my couch and cried, not because of the promotion, but because for the first time, someone saw me without needing me to shrink. Weeks passed, then a month, then 2. That's when my phone finally rang. My mother. I watched it buzz on the table, my heart pounding in a way that surprised me. I answered, "Hi, Mom." There was a pause on the other end. Then she said carefully, "Elena, you've been distant." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I said, "I've been busy." Silence. She cleared her throat. "We're having a small family dinner next weekend. I assumed you'd come." Assumed. No apology. No acknowledgement. No explanation. Just expectation. I looked around my apartment. The plants I'd kept alive. The books I'd actually finished. The peace I'd built quietly. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself a question I'd never dared to ask before. What happens if I don't go? I took a breath. "Mom," I said slowly, "I don't think I will." The silence on the other end was different this time. Sharp, uncomfortable. "Why not?" she asked. And as I opened my mouth to answer, I realized this wasn't just about dinner. This was the moment everything would change. Didn't answer my mother right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time, I was choosing my words for myself, not for her comfort. "I'm tired," I finally said. Not physically, just tired. She exhaled sharply. "Elena, everyone gets tired. That's not a reason to pull away from family." There it was, pulling away, as if I had been drifting instead of standing still while they walked past me. "I'm not pulling away," I said quietly. "I'm just not forcing myself forward anymore." She didn't like that. I could hear it in the way her voice tightened. "You're being dramatic." I almost apologized out of habit. Almost. Instead, I said, "I need some space." The word space landed badly. It always did with her. Space implied distance. Distance implied consequences. "Well," she said coolly, "I hope you don't regret this." The call ended soon after. Polite, controlled, unresolved. I set my phone down and sat there for a long time, listening to the hum of traffic outside my window. I expected guilt. It came, of course. But something else came with it. Relief. The family dinner happened without me. I knew because Marissa posted a photo of the table settings, candles, linen napkins, the kind of details my mother cared deeply about. Daniel was tagged. Marissa was tagged. I was not. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a wound. It felt like confirmation. My absence didn't cause chaos. No one called in panic. No one demanded explanations. Life went on, and that realization was both painful and clarifying. I had spent years believing I was holding things together, but the truth was, I had been holding myself back. With the extra emotional energy I wasn't spending managing my family, my world got bigger. I took the senior coordinator interview seriously, prepared, asked questions, advocated for myself in ways I never had before. 2 weeks later, I got the offer. A raise, a title, actual authority. I celebrated alone, ordered takeout, opened a cheap bottle of wine, sat on the floor of my living room and let myself feel proud without waiting for permission. I didn't tell my family, not out of spite, out of self-protection. That summer, my mother started calling more often. At first, it was casual. How's work? Are you eating properly? You should come by sometime. I kept my answers brief, neutral, polite. She didn't ask about Mother's Day again. She didn't apologize. But she noticed something was different. She could feel it. One evening, Daniel texted me. Mom's upset you don't come around anymore. I stared at the message. Then I typed, I didn't stop coming around. I stopped being invisible. He didn't reply. What surprised me most was Marisa. She showed up at my apartment one Saturday afternoon without warning. She looked uncomfortable standing in my doorway, like she wasn't sure she was welcome. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. Small talk at first, weather, work, her art. Then she said, Mom thinks you're punishing her. I laughed softly. I'm not. Then what are you doing? I thought about it. I'm choosing myself. She frowned. You always chose yourself. You just did it quietly. That stung, because it wasn't entirely wrong. I chose everyone else first, I said, and called it maturity. She didn't argue. Before she left, Marissa paused at the door. You know, she said, Mom doesn't understand this version of you. I know, I replied. She hesitated. She's embarrassed. There it was again. Embarrassed. Not regretful, not reflective. Embarrassed. I nodded. That's hers to sit with. Marissa left without another word. A week later, my mother invited me to lunch. Just the two of us. Her tone was careful, almost formal. I agreed, not because I was ready to reconcile, but because I was ready to stop explaining. We met at a cafe near Prospect Park, neutral territory. No family history baked into the walls. She arrived early, already seated, already composed. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. Elena, she said. You look well. I am, I replied. We ordered, polite, distant. Then she leaned forward. I want to clear the air, she said. This distance, it's not healthy. I looked at her hands folded neatly on the table. This distance, I said calmly, is the healthiest thing I've ever done. Her lips pressed together. She didn't like that answer. And I knew in that moment, this conversation wasn't going to be about understanding. It was going to be about control. My mother stirred her coffee slowly, the spoon clinking against the porcelain like it was buying her time. Elena, she said without looking up, you have to understand how things look. I met her eyes. I do. That's the problem. She sighed, already frustrated. You work in community outreach. People don't always respect that. When we go out together, when people ask what my children do, I raised my hand gently, not angrily, just enough to stop her. Mom, I said, you don't need to finish that sentence. She froze. I had never interrupted her before. The silence between us felt unfamiliar, uneven. I know you care about appearances, I continued, keeping my voice steady. But excluding me wasn't about protecting me. It was about protecting how you're seen. Her jaw tightened. That's not fair. It's accurate, I replied. She leaned back, crossing her arms, defensive. You always assume the worst. I thought of Mother's Day, of that message, of being erased quietly. I assume patterns, I said, not motives. She changed tactics. Daniel and Marisa don't have an issue, she said. Why are you the only one struggling with this? That old comparison, the one that used to shrink me. They don't struggle, I said, because they've never been excluded for who they are. Her eyes flashed. That's not true. Then why wasn't I invited? I asked calmly. She opened her mouth, closed it. For a brief moment, I thought she might actually say it. Instead, she said, I didn't want drama. I smiled faintly. Mom, I said, I wasn't going to cause drama. I was just going to exist. That landed harder than anything else I'd said. We sat there in silence, the sounds of the cafe filling the space we couldn't. Finally, she said, "So what is it you want? An apology?" I considered that. "No," I said. "I want honesty. And I want respect." She scoffed lightly. "Respect is a two-way street." I nodded. "Exactly. And that's why I stopped crossing it alone." When lunch ended, nothing was